All right. I guess we go ahead and get started. So, hey everyone. For those of you who joined last time, I'm Dan Havermail. I lead revenue marketing and partnerships here at Fay. And with me today, I have Jason Green. Jason, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks for having me. This is Jason Green, president of FAY, and super excited to join this session and ask any questions about AI.
Awesome. Well, we're going to do things a little bit differently this time. We took your feedback into account. So thank you for those of you who sent feedback across, and thank you for sent questions ahead of time. If you didn't send questions ahead of time, totally fine as well. At any point throughout the session, feel free to ask clarifying questions, additional questions, or if something just pops into your head. We also have a list of kind of guided themes that we're going to kind of take folks through in terms of the questions we have, and we've kind of put those together. So before we get started, I wanted to have everyone go in. So one, you know how to do it. Put in one thing, whether it's a question you have or just a topic you're interested in AI, into the questions panel there and hit submit on that so we have it. And that's going to help us drive some of the topics that we cover for today. So there's a Q&A panel. You can hit that, or you can put them right in the chat there. Either one is fine. Well, looks like everybody's being a little bit shy today. All right. Well, make sure to put your questions in as they come in. Oh, looks like the chat has been disabled. There, okay. There's some questions coming in now. Thank you, anonymous attendee. Thank you, Sandra. So the chat's been disabled. So yes, please use the Q&A inside of there as part of it as well. All right, great. Well, we'll get started with some of our first submitted questions as part of this too. So, Jason, one of the questions we kind of continue to get, and I've summarized these from a few people, is it smarter to begin with a focused AI rollout with a single team or aim for a broader company-wide launch, kind of big bang from the start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think um, if there's appetite at the ownership level, at the board level, the executive level, you could do both things in parallel. But because this is so new and it really, in many ways, represents a lot of potential change, the more narrow the focus, the more narrow the aperture, the better. And if you can start with one specific team with, one or two work streams for that team, um, you can get quite a bit of traction at that level before then kind of expanding it out into other areas.
Okay, great. Kind of similar theme on kind of the getting started and strategy side. Um, Are there clear signs that a company is truly ready for AI adoption, or they're trying to jump in too soon to that topic?
Yeah, in terms of adopting AI and whether a company is ready, I'm not sure if a company's ever, if anyone's ever going to be ready for this. And I say that because I think if we had a crystal ball or we had a time machine, we can go to the future. I mean, it could be pretty crazy what starts to manifest with AI, especially as we get into an age down the road where robotics merge with AI and we have robots that are autonomous versus just software agents that are autonomous. But I think when you have either an executive team or the CEO or CFO or someone who's really like, hey, we need to do this. Hey, I see the potential. Hey, I have the vision. I think that's a good place to be looking, saying, okay, there's an appetite. Let's do some AI adoption.
Okay, that's great. And then when organizations first start to roll out AI, what's the, again, most common thing they get wrong when doing that, or a misstep they take that if they had looked into the future and looked back, they would have changed or done differently?
Yeah, I think there tends to be an initial focus on the technology that hey, we can just go get ChatGPT or Claude, or we can just kind of roll some tools and do some things. And there's kind of skipping the whole strategy part, the posture part. Also, just hey, how does this affect team culture? Do people understand what this means? And that all leads to maybe the bigger thing that a lot of companies are skipping, which is just the education side, is making sure that educational tools for AI, such as Section School, are provided to team members so they can become more familiar with AI. Because honestly, for a lot of people, most people, they just think AI means ChatGPT. Forget about the fact that there's other LLMs. You got Gemini, you got Anthropic, you got Perplexity as an example, which just is LLMs. That's just the tip of the iceberg of all the AI stuff, anyways. Most people really are limited in their understanding of what this means, and so you do have a lot of scenarios where people might try to ask a GPT a question and it doesn't give them a good answer, but they didn't really prompt it correctly, and then they kind of give up. So.
So education is really important to make sure people are comfortable and have a baseline level of understanding to be productive with the AI tools that you're running.
Yeah, and because the AI is has a when you interface with it, it's almost quasi-human or at least mimics human behavior, and so it's a bit different than interfacing with some other tools, and so you kind of have to learn how you think about interacting with AI. I mean, I always like to say it's kind of like a really smart 11-year-old who learns really fast. So it's like an 11-year-old intern that learns fast, and so you normally wouldn't really have an 11-year-old intern at your company that's learning super quick. And so that just requires kind of a different approach to things.
That's great. And on that topic, Karen had a question around where is the best place to get educated as part of
Yeah,
IT.
look, I think a couple different things. One, I think you should synthesize as much information as possible, podcasts and webinars, things like this today, and just kind of start to synthesize. And number two, that's just one part. Number two is Section School offers a great set of courses, AI Academy courses that you can get certified and proficient on AI for you and your team. That is another great set of courses to work through. They also have like something called Prof AI, which is a agent that you can then kind of almost like AI teacher that you can ask questions. It can give you different things for you to do and kind of different projects. And then the third part of education is experimentation. We don't normally think about that. Well, at least in the business realm, we don't normally think about, oh, I'm going to go do an experiment and that's how I'm going to learn. But I think experimenting with different modalities, go try to use image generators, go use video generators like Sora or Runway. Go create a movie. Go create an avatar. Go clone your voice. Start playing with these different technologies because even if some of them aren't perfect or better than human or useful enough yet, you should understand what's out there and what's possible. And especially when you start lacing different tools together, like you're going to make a 30-second movie where you have to lace the video with images from a different piece of software, from a script from a GPT. It starts to teach you how to interface and interact with multiple tools across the work streams you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And internally here, we decided to partner with Section School, and that's what we recommend as part of a lot of our AI leadership and kind of consulting here. And one of the reasons I think too is because it allows us to kind of track who has at least a baseline understanding and certification. And I think we're up to about 90% of the employee base is baseline educated. So when we're able to have department level discussions, we're able to go through that. But there's a lot of other great content out there on YouTube. Lessonly has some great content, but we like Section School because it allows us to track that certification process, and then also offers that agent that Jason talked about that does more customized AI training. So basically, if I'm a sales rep, I'll have totally different training than if I'm a financial administrator, maybe in the accounting department or something like that as well.
Yeah.
Great. Well, you mentioned, skipping ahead and focusing more on the tooling than the process and that being some things. But again, that seems to be a question we get time and time again too, is when you are evaluating an AI tool, whether it's one of the foundation models or more of a point solution, what are the things you should be doing and looking at when evaluating and selecting a particular AI tool to help your organization, either at a department level or organizationally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you're evaluating tools, software with AI, you should understand what the tool is doing for you versus can you do that just with Anthropic, the Claude or GPT, for example? Because there's a lot of tools that really are very basic wrappers, and they say they're custom GPTs or they even say they're agents, and all they're really doing is having an instruction set in a project, somewhat on ChatGPT, on OpenAI's LLM. And if you're looking at tools, you're like, oh, this is really cool, and you understand it, it's really just a light wrapper to probably a subscription you already have. You should think about, do I really need that tool or not? Can I build that inside some sort of agentic portal framework? So that's the other thing to be thinking about. Because there's a lot of tools, and I've seen companies be like, "Oh, I got this one tool for marketing, and these three tools for sales, and these other tools for ops, and finance is this other thing." And it's like, okay, what are we doing? Like, does this make any sense? And so I think understanding that's um, pretty important. That's like a good starting place when evaluating.
Yeah, that's great. And for those of you who don't know, a wrapper is effectively just, and there's a lot of these out there now, tools that have taken one of the base foundation models like OpenAI or Anthropic and just wrapped a UI around them. And you're effectively just interacting with the LLM directly, but they're upcharging a certain amount of money for, basically a fancy interface when in reality, to Jason's point, you could be getting the exact same response from a subscription you potentially already have. And we see this with our clients too, is they get a lot of sprawl of individual point solutions. And now there's kind of a regression back to looking at AI orchestration platforms that allow to consolidate that and have some of the same functionality inside of a single UI as part of that too. Great. All right, so we'll move on to our next set of topics here around ROI and business impact. Um, what separates a good AI pilot or POC that scales into production from one that ends up stalling out or getting shelved? We hear about a lot of these AI programs in the news that, they've spent a lot of money and a lot of time and they ended up not going anywhere. And then we hear other ones where, they were able to get 90% increase in efficiency from the team and automate a ton of tasks. So, what helps separate those, Jason, when we're looking at them?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I always like to point out, at least philosophic, like from our philosophy and our belief is that these AI projects are and should be different. Uh, when you implement a CRM or an ERP is probably even a more acute example. You either have it or you don't. You're either at 0% or 100%, and there's no place in between. And I think with AI, it should be approached in a very agile way. Like really, instead of maybe even necessarily thinking about one project, think about three or four at the same time potentially, but in a very agile way where like you do the core testing and experimentation over a couple weeks or a month, and it's like green light, red light. Do you have what you need to go to the next step, to the next gate with the project? Because you should be focusing, I think, on things that are easy to measure that have an ROI and projects and experiments where you can see a result in 2 weeks or 1 week. Like you're able to see immediate results. And I think that helps because I think it's easy to kind of get down a rabbit hole on a project and then, you get to the end and it just doesn't work the way you think. Whereas if you take a much more agile approach, okay, that project might not have worked, but guess what? Maybe it didn't work at week 2 versus like month 6. And that allows you then to switch gears to a different project that does work. And then the other thing to think is some of this stuff is like you might set out and be like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. It's gonna save us $100,000, and you might only get to a place where it saves 20,000, and then you're done. Okay, it still saves 20,000, and so that's how I would be approaching this.
Yeah, so that you don't necessarily need to get to 100% in order for
Yeah,
allowed to be successful.
in many ways, 100%. Well, like in some, it actually should kind of be viewed aspirationally. In fact, it's probably more useful if it's viewed aspirationally. Oh, we could have this thing, it could save 500,000. Okay, well, if it saves 100,000, that could still be a big win.
Right. So
Doesn't mean it
because
was a
perfect can be the
failure. I
enemy
think
of
that's the
good.
thing, right? Is there, and I think you start to get this diminishing return. So maybe you get to a place where it saves $100,000, and it's like squeezing, turnip, or like it's just like, oh, let me try to get the 500 because our goal was 500. It's just like time out. Like you saved 100, you got really far. Your marginal utility is going to be too hard to even get to 200. Just stop, go work on a different process. There's so many processes, and then also you probably learn some things from doing that project that you can then take within the department if you're focused on a department, or you could take to a different department. Plus, people get excited then when it's like, okay, we had success, we saved 100 grand, this project was successful. But if you set out and say, hey, the project saved 100, 500K, you're like, oops, we have 100, we didn't get there. People are gonna be like, ah, this sucks. You're going to lose momentum that way too.
It's totally different perception. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Beyond simple adoption and tracking kind of user metrics, who's using an agent or who's using ChatGPT or Copilot, what are the best ways to tell if AI is actually moving the needle for the business?
I think when you're thinking about is it moving the needle, you can look at kind of multiple ways. I mean, you could look at the cost side and you can see, hey, are we saving money on something with AI? So that's an easy one. And the other is on a client service side, is there something we're providing a better level of service? Now that can get a little bit more subjective. Maybe you're providing better proposals or a better quality of sales enablement, or you're able to interface with clients 24/7 where you didn't have that capability before. And so you can look at both pieces. Some is more objective, some are more subjective. Um, were you able to do something that normally you'd have to pay a third party for that you were able to now do yourself? So that's something. But yeah, I would look kind of along those three type of dimensions.
I think that's great advice. Um, to that point too, right? I think there's a lot of marketing out there and collateral of, give us X money and get Y savings in 30 days, or, deflect 99% of tickets in 25 days of implementation, right? In practice, from what you're seeing, how long does it usually take before AI investments really start to produce measurable returns?
So that's an interesting question because I think you have to parse, you have to think about this a little differently, or at least in components or stages. Like there's definitely this thing where it's like, okay, what's my ROI on my investment? We say this all the time in business. Right? What's my ROI? I'm going to invest X, and what's my ROI? What am I getting back? And in many ways, okay, that's a very simple way. And I mean, at the end, did you get ROI? But it's also almost like it's somewhat too simple because the first thing is there any measurable result? Because like let's say you spent $20,000 on some AI investment, quote unquote. And at first, you're able to get $10,000 of value, or let's just say 20,000 in value. I mean, the ROI is still like, zero. But you got to view this as like stepping stones, right? And you got to look at this and say, okay, we did something, we embarked on a project, we did actually get some sort of output, some outcome that was good, and then how do we iterate to make it better? Now, So you could get measurable results. This is kind of goes back to my previous thing I was pointing out is like you could say I'm going to do project X. I'm going to spend $20,000. I got a measurable result in 3 weeks. I got $10,000 from that. Okay, well, I'm still out 10,000. That's you could look at it like that, but it's better to look at it and say, okay, this is a stepping stone towards bigger things. And if you have a broader strategic framework and you're kind of looking at AI as a journey, like we're going up a mountain, you should have a sense of like what does it look like 5 steps out, right? What does our business look like? Um, what is our team? What is our EBITDA? And I think if you view it like that it's a journey, that it's just kind of this transformation that keeps going, I think it's a lot easier to like understand each component along the way and understand that you're directionally going towards something super interesting because, you know, no one really knows how all this is going to shake out. We don't know. We don't know if for some companies, for some organizations, especially larger ones, there could, and we're already seeing it in the news, right? So it's not like I'm making this up. There's a lot of layoffs already related to AI in certain fields and certain large companies. Um, in other companies, you just not hire a new person for years, that you're able to use your existing team and make them all superheroes, and now they're able to do more. So maybe you're growing as a company, your top line's growing, your bottom line's growing, but you might not understand what that is or how that's connected for potentially years out. And then suddenly you look back and companies might look back, leaders might look back and be like, wow, like we just doubled or tripled our EBITDA. And it kind of all started when we had this shift in AI. That was kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that story kind of lays it out a bit for people.
No, I think the context is good. And before we move on to our next kind of set of topics here, we did have a question specifically kind of on ROI. Is that you mentioned ROI, Jason, but what are some good ROI indicators that will show that AI has been successful and that you should move forward kind of to that next gate that you were mentioning?
Yeah, so good question. I'm going to answer this with a few possible answers. One is if you're measuring units of time. Um, Now let's use a basic example. You've got one person and they have to spend 300 minutes a month on something. Okay. And now that person spends 150 minutes a month. That's an indicator, and it's happening because you've implemented with some eye for that particular user. Now that's kind of at the atomic level, one user, 300 minutes to 150. That is a good indicator that something is working with AI. Now, back to my previous comment, you might not have ROI yet because you might be have a capital investment here. Again, how much of this is CapEx versus OpEx? That's another thing to be thinking about of how you're even viewing this AI investment. So you might have a good indicator with that you can now expand on, right? And so even if you've spent $20,000, I'll just use 20,000 as a number. A lot of projects aren't even that much, but we'll use that number. Let's say you spent 20,000 and now that person goes from 300 minutes to 150 minutes. Now, look, maybe over the course of the year, maybe that's $6,000 of savings. But don't get caught up in that atomic aspect of it. You got to look and say, hey, we set out to do something with AI and we were able to save. And so then the question is, can we apply that same type of project, and maybe we can do that project for $3,000 for this other person or this other team, right? Or maybe this next one is 12,000 for this other person, and then the next seven after that is 2,000, right? And so you have to kind of look at this in stepping stones because it's so new, because it's kind of really at the edge of technology, it's the edge of what people are understanding. It's just important initially that like there's some time savings from AI. The other thing that you could also look at is there is like, hey, you were going to hire this person and now you're not. You had a role that was open and you're like, well, hey, now we're solving this ourselves. We don't need that role anymore. We don't need to hire for that role, I mean.
Okay, I think that's great. Cool. Let's move on to kind of team and culture overall. And I think we got some kind of questions related to this too from the crowd. So, um, what's the kind of tipping point between upskilling the current team you may have and bringing in a dedicated AI specialist? And when do you need to do one of the two of those? Or maybe do you need to do both of them simultaneously?
Yeah, look, it's everyone I talk to, and I spend a lot of time talking to a lot of business leaders, CEO, owners of businesses, executive teams. And the general sentiment is, well, we're doing stuff with AI, but we can always be doing more. So to answer your question, I think you do both. I think you've got to train and upskill your team, and at the same time, you should consider bringing in a third party where it makes sense, both from a strategy side of like how do we approach there's someone to help hold the executive team accountable because they're busy with their day jobs. They're busy with needing to grow the business. And now there's this third thing, which is like growing the business, almost like transforming the business into something totally new. Um, so I think you can do both. I think if you don't really have a super technical team, then you're going to definitely need some help because if you really want to start really evolving this and building autonomous agents, there needs to be data that gets integrated and different kind of technical things that are happening that you might not have the team to do all that. So I would be looking at all of it together. Um,
Okay. That's great. And then one of the questions we have too is, and this is a little bit tactical, but on that too, right? How do we track and how can managers review users' weekly activity when using AI?
okay, hi Sandra. I think you're asking if we can track the actual usage of AI. So I'll answer it based on that. Depending on the framework you're using, if you're using, for example, we have a portal framework. There's a few of them out there where you have all the users in one system, and then you can track and audit and see how much they're actually using AI on a day-to-day basis. Now, the other way, which is actually how I first read the question, is how do I use AI to review user activity in other parts of the business, like if we're in the CRM, like how many activities, and can we use AI to review that? So if we're talking about the CRM, for example, and I know, Sandra, I know you use Sugar, we do have something called a Fay Agent Builder that sits in a side panel and can kind of digest the information and summarize it and kind of give you insight into what's going on with user activity. Now that could be whether you have Sugar or not, doesn't matter. Um, it can also ingest other data from email and meetings and different data sources and kind of analyze it on a regular basis to give you insight.
That's a great
Research
answer to
assistant. And
both
basically as
both
a
ways.
business analyst assistant. Yeah.
To both ways as part of that too. Great. Okay, last question in that kind of topic set. How should leaders respond when employees are worried that AI might replace them or potentially devalue their role?
Well, I think you really have to this comes to the posture and strategy and like how as a company. Look, if you're investing in tools for the staff, that's one thing that's really good. And I think you've got to have in all hands. And I think taking an approach where, hey, we're going to make all of you superheroes. We're going to triple our company with the same team because we now have AI and every one of you becomes more valuable. I think that's how you have to do it. People are scared. People are worried. And if people are worried about losing their job and people are worried they're going to just be obsolete, they're certainly not going to want to adopt AI because that's just going to accelerate that into oblivion. Now, if they believe it's going to help them just be super awesome at their job and become somewhat indispensable, or at least if not indispensable, like just super valuable compared to like what they cost the company, then I think people are going to be excited about it because, it's easy for us in tech and in software and in the space we're in to just think everything's moving so fast. And look, everything is moving fast with AI, but the reality is businesses that are not in tech, it's still very, very early in the adoption curve of companies adopting AI and it truly becoming this transformative change that is promised or the vision or both.
Great. Um, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think when you do get to use AI and it is productive, you do feel like a superhero, right? You've done the work of multiple people before. So if you can reinforce that messaging, it is really powerful in making folks feel comfortable. I know we've done that here
Well,
internally too.
well, and the other thing to think about too with the staff, um, especially if you have people on staff that are just working a lot of hours, just really, really burning the midnight oil and just working a lot every single day, every single week, more than maybe is what they would, more than what they would desire to work. Is look, AI can help them, right? Like you don't need to take 1 hour to draft that content or to come up and organize your thoughts for a project. You could use AI in 3 minutes to do what would have taken you an hour. So, okay, maybe you use those other 57 minutes to do other work. But like I was saying, like if you're just working a lot, like, hey, maybe now this today you had to work 7 hours instead of 10, right? And there's benefit then for the staff. So if that's part of the narrative that it's also going to make the staff's lives, people's lives better, then I think that's really interesting. I mean, I always like to think about yesterday's tomorrows. Like if I think about the Jetsons, like where's our jetpacks? Where are the robots? Right? If you were alive, like and people remember when in the 60s or in 50s, there was all this promise. We're gonna have flying cars, we're gonna have jetpacks, we're gonna have robots. And yet here we are, and sitting in traffic, trying to get from O'Hare to downtown Chicago. Like, what's that about? And so, why am I saying? I'm saying that because at the end of the day, like, what is the point of all this technology if it doesn't at some point improve people's lives dramatically? And so, if you have a message and a story and a narrative to staff that connects to that, like, kind of broader societal vision, people are going to be on board with that, right? Like people already, especially younger generations, they're thinking like, what's up? Like, why don't I work 10 hours a week? Like in the year 2300, are people still working the same amount of hours? And so I think it just kind of taps into this very human desire to just not have to just do all this stuff all the time.
I think that's great. And that's it's great from an aspirational perspective too.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move to our next section, which we're gonna call kind of practical and tactical, right? So we got a few questions here, but one we get time and time again is, what's one practical AI use case you believe nearly any organization can kind of get started with today that they should be doing?
I think one of the most there, I'll give two examples. One is on the marketing side, having really expanding the marketing team with brand agents, someone to make sure you're on point to the brand with any content, any emails, any messaging, a brand strategist if you have new strategy as a company you're trying to do to make sure it's on point from a brand strategy perspective. So I think there's a lot of really interesting ways to take advantage of AI that are typically reserved for much, much larger organizations with entire brand teams. I think another a thing is on the sales side, enablement, using digital avatars to do role playing and even not role playing, but like training videos, training podcasts, the ability to take material you have and convert it into different modalities, whether it's an interactive avatar, whether it's a video training, whether it's a podcast, whether it's just kind of visual written things, project ideas or like test ideas for this enablement. There's huge amounts of potential with enablement where typically you're quite restricted on how much training or enablement you're able to give the sales team. It's kind of like an afterthought. You might have someone who's in charge of enablement, but there's always never enough resources put into enablement. And I think AI can really, really up the game in that arena. We're seeing that with multiple clients.
That's great. Another question kind of from the crowd here too. Can AI pull in information about an account from the internet? For example, LinkedIn or years in business or who the best salesperson for a region is, things like that.
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of data sources out there that scrape and house this data. There's a lot of different subscriptions and tools that you can get um, that are doing just that. And those are available. And then I think maybe an interesting question is with those tools, you pull data in and then you use AI to do analysis based on your internal data of, hey, if we always have a rep, if the deal is in the southeast, we need a rep in this location or put this person on it, or I don't know. There's all kinds of things that AI might discover about who's the best for different types of companies along dimensions you're not thinking about because it's analyzing your internal CRM and ERP data, and then it's got a model or a knowledge graph kind of around that, and then you say, hey, um, here's this other data about this prospect potentially. Who's best suited for that?
Yeah. And just from my perspective as, leading marketing here too, and we've done some of that and some of the agents we've built for CRMs, the foundation models are definitely capable of pulling some of this information. So I would encourage you, Victoria, to just test out Gemini and Perplexity and ChatGPT and ask it, prompt it that question about a particular account you're looking at and see how good it does as part of that. There are other tools out there. Obviously, Zoom Info is kind of a legacy one that has a lot of that information already stored, but then tools like Clay will go out and scrape that information from websites. But today we're seeing a lot of success and to be honest, a lot of pretty consistent good answers coming back from leveraging the foundation models to actually scrape that information and then putting it back into the CRM, into native fields to be able to do things like reporting on it and things like that too. Cool. All right, we got a few more here. So what foundational processes or data changes should be in place before we try to layer in AI into the business, Jason?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And it's something that's coming up a lot. A lot of organizations don't have or don't have a data warehouse or don't have much of a sophisticated data warehouse or data lake or a place where all the data across your systems is kind of aggregating into one place so it's accessible. And the thing with a lot of the AI is it needs to ingest a lot of data across systems to be super useful. And so I would probably be in parallel looking at your strategy for data warehouse and executing iteratively on either creating one, and creating one doesn't have to be something crazy. Start with just one data source, but have a data warehouse strategy and start moving up, iterating on it in parallel. I'd start that right away because you're going to need it. Or you have it and it's going to need to be better and ingest more information than it currently does. So that's pretty critical um, piece. Now, look, with the AI, like if you make an agent, like something that you need, an agent or like a custom GPT where it has to ingest data sources, sure, like you could have it and it connects to the CRM or connects to the ERP or connects to both of them, and you could use stuff like Zapier and Tray and kind of iPass your way through it, which is fine, especially as you're just piloting and proof of concept and even in production, totally cool. But directionally where things are going, like you need to get a data warehouse going at some basic level.
To be able to pull that information in and have it read that information to give better responses.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, Another question we got from the crowd, can you use AI to run through a list of records and then kind of determine the top 5 to 10 with the most potential volume or the ones that need the most activity in the next 30 days?
Yeah, you can definitely use AI for that. I mean, if you're using Sugar and you have the Fay Agent Builder, that's super simple to do. If you're using Salesforce, agentic stuff for that, we do those type of things as well. Same with HubSpot, even CX tools. All of that's very possible and easy to have AI analyze the data, which is kind of replacing then the need to have a financial analyst analyze the data. And look, you don't even have to integrate. You can just export some reports and then say, here are these three reports. Here's what I'm trying to find out about this data set, and just have AI go to town. I would try it out in both GPT, Chat GPT, for example, with OpenAI. I tried it out in Anthropic. I tried it out in Gemini. So that's another thing about using a portal where you can kind of have all the tools at once and you can compare answers side by side because you're going to find some are better at the Excel analysis than others, but that's probably what I would do.
That's a great call out, Jason. I think some things that people forget too, right, is you don't necessarily need to have the AI hooked in directly to your data source, especially if you're looking for a specific set of questions, right? And I've done this early on. I know a lot of folks in our company too, right? Is we've just exported a data set that we're looking at a particular set of accounts or set of, financial records over a period of time and put those in and even put in multiple exports and had the AI look at them. And it's really good at aggregating and looking for patterns and doing analysis kind of in real time. And to your point, you don't have to be a business analyst, right? You can ask questions in natural language of that data and get surprisingly accurate and good responses in real time, as opposed to sending that report off and having someone do some data analysis, getting it back, asking more questions. So you're really able to speed up that time.
Yeah, and I wouldn't get, and the thing is, especially proof of concepts, pilots, experimentation is so important. So just because you don't have a data source connected automatically, don't be like, oh, we got to do that first before we're going to try it. No, forget that. Just export the report. Just try it out because this goes back to the components and the notions of ROI. So even if you have to export data and that takes you some time to do, the very step of taking that data and having it be analyzed in a minute, where it would take a financial analyst in this particular example, let's say it would take them 3 hours, right? The time dilation, both minute versus 3 hours, and just the cost, like that's important to understand. And maybe you would never do that type of analysis because you don't have a financial analyst on staff. So this ties all the way back to how do I measure ROI? How do I think about it? You have to think about what you can now do that you couldn't do before and what that would actually cost, even though you don't have that resource on staff. Because you might spend 20,000, you're like, oh, I just saved 10,000, but like I also was able to utilize like $80,000 worth of AI, which would have been the $80,000 cost as humans. And you just have to kind of just start to understand some of this interchange because it's not super clear exactly how this is all going to shake out yet.
Yeah, no, we got a flood of questions to that point too, which is I think everyone's thinking, oh my gosh, well now everyone's going to export all the data and feed it right into these things, right? How do we set up some guardrails to ensure that folks can do experiments like that, but also keep our data confidential, and still move quickly like that
Yeah.
too?
Okay. So it's great. It's a great question. So a couple of things. I'm gonna kind of work our way up the ladder on this. When you, depending if you're just using Claude or GPT and you have a business level subscription or higher, you have the ability to say, don't train my model. Don't train on my data for the model. Okay, that's like a basic thing to do. Fine. Um, to get more sophisticated, especially if you're using a portal that connects into something like Amazon Bedrock, you can do things that are HIPAA compliant on these models in Bedrock. You can do things that are ITAR DFAR compliant on a GovCloud of Anthropic or GPT or different models inside Bedrock. Okay. So, similar to other compliance, data moves around and goes places outside of your organization. And you have to understand the compliance of these tool sets. And that's what I'm talking about Bedrock as an example, because that's more security. Now, depending on if you're a bank or some other institution where you're just like, yeah, we need this in house. Okay, fine. So like you can set up open models like Llama um, to run in your own private, call it private cloud, right? Whether it's on premise in your physical environment or in the cloud and private, it's the same thing. And so as you can start to explore in that direction. And that's where if you have an agent wrapper, you're like, okay, this agent wrapper, people can use it on their phone, people can use it on their desktop, but it's only connecting into our specific LLM that we have that is completely closed loop. But for most use cases, it's not different than needing to be compliant like SOC 2 or HIPAA or any other kind of compliance framework where data is moving around. But training is important, right? Just like training for IT is important. Hey, this data set, it has custom, you can use AI for this, don't use it for that. But if you do use it for that, at least you're structured in a way where you're okay.
Yeah, I think that's great and it's really important because I think folks are definitely constantly concerned about the sprawl of things, but having a centralized AI framework that folks know is safe to use is really important that they can do
I
that.
think, and I don't know if I didn't really think about this before, but now I'm thinking about it because I see these questions and they come up time to time. If you're an organization, well, most organizations follow at least some sort of compliance framework, but consider generally upgrading your compliance. So if you're not SOC 2, become SOC 2, because then you're going to have a general IT framework that you can use that will help you manage data overall, which will thus help you manage AI. But don't just be like, we're not going to do anything because that didn't work with bring your when you had your phones and everyone's like, you can't use your personal devices. Everyone used it anyways, so they had to adapt. People are going to use AI. Like that's the thing is even if you're like, don't use it, people are using it for work with customer data probably right now. Don't
Yep.
freak out. Maybe freak out. I don't know.
So to summarize, training important, right? Give them a place to do these experiments that's in a
Yeah, that
safe
it's safe. So
environment.
they're not using it on their personal GPT that trains the model, right? Or worse than that is like just using some random tool that they signed up for free that's some wrapper, some agent, and like then you don't even know what's going on behind the scenes with that or where that data store is that SOC 2. Because if you're just using GPT and Cloud, like that's all compliant. Those are super tight security, but your end users have no idea. So yes, Dan, you got to have a place where you can go safely and use it. And you have to provide it to them. Otherwise, they're going to just do random stuff.
Great. Well, I know we're coming up on time here, and I think that's a good place to end it. But does anyone have
Yeah.
any last remaining questions before we shut down here for the day? Any final parting words you want to leave anyone with, Jason, on how to get started or
Just do
what to
stuff.
do?
Do AI
Just do
stuff.
stuff.
Much as you can, as much as you're doing, you need to do more. Because if this is anything, look, if this is between 1994, where the advent of the internet, somewhere between that and the first time homes were wired for electricity in the United States, which is 1882. So if it's anywhere across that spectrum, it is going to be transformative for business. And it might not happen right now, but if you look back in time, some of this stuff, it goes slow. And then all of a sudden you wake up and suddenly your business is obsolete. So just do stuff.
All right. I think that's a great place to end it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to send them afterwards, and we'll see you on our next AMA. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.